Welcome to the Friday at 4 podcast series with your host Charles Luttrell and co-host Steve Kent.
Steve, good afternoon. Welcome back to the Friday at 4 podcast series. How are you?
All right, doing well, Chuck. How you doing? How you doing?
Well, another stressful week.
Ugh, you got to
Yeah,
stop this stuff. You got to
yeah.
stop.
We'll talk about it.
All right, we'll
Yeah.
talk about it after the call. We'll talk about it.
After this, we will talk about it. It is what it is, right? I knew it was coming. I just didn't know when. And here it is.
Oh
Welcome
boy.
to Chuck's World.
Okay then.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, man. Yeah. So, what you got today? What's the topic of discussion?
So I was thinking as we were kicking around, it wasn't my idea. We were kicking around, um, how reality and the way it's presented are not always the same thing. And yes, I know that's a very vague statement. So let's try to dive in and explain that a little bit. Because yeah, I realized when I said it, I was like, okay, Steve's all the way out there somewhere. Bring it down a little bit.
He's out on Mars. Get off the rover and get back
Yeah,
here
get
on
off
Earth,
to Earth
buddy.
and Mars, come back to Earth. Okay. But why? Okay, anyway, it's more fun up in Mars. Anyway,
Yeah,
um, so let's start on the business side and we will go to the personal side. So on the business side, we all know that whatever industry that you're in, and they're all the same. The pictures that we see, the movies we see, the print ads we see is not necessarily what it really is. So if we take a look at the example you gave when we were chatting, you go into a chain of burgers. I'm not going to mention names because they're
burger chain,
pretty much all the same.
right?
You look at the pictures um, online, you look at any commercials on TV, any print ads and stuff, and they make this really fancy salad. They make this really fancy burger and fries, and all these smiley, happy people are going in to buy, and they're smiling, and it's dripping down their face, and then they really love it. But then we walk into the same place and it's not exactly the way it's portrayed to us. Sometimes it's overcooked, undercooked, uh, not necessarily as fresh, as good looking. And you start to wonder, how is it that they're allowed to do this? And again, this is a generic statement. Again, this is our
Yeah, sure.
opinions and all this other stuff.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying anything's wrong with it, but there just seems to be a growing disparity between what's portrayed and what is. And again, it doesn't matter what industry. It could be the burgers and fries. It could be cars. They make this big fancy car that's all shiny. Um, is it really? Then you get um, those bottles of car wax formula, and they throw all this mud and dirt on the car. They spray the formula and off it wipes. And it's so nice.
Gone.
But it doesn't always work that way. It doesn't. I'm not saying the product's bad, but it's just exaggerated for what it is, all in the emphasis of money, of getting people to think products and services are better than they are.
Yeah,
And I always said, it's up to me as the consumer, not just me, but a general as the consumer, to decide whether or not you want to spend money or your time on a particular thing. And it's that saying buyer beware, and I get that. But all I'm asking, again, my opinion, all I'm asking is just be honest. Yes, You can tell me all the good things, but tell me all the bad things. When was the last time you saw and either heard or saw an advertisement for a medication? The medication will solve, I don't know, my fingernail is too short, whatever. And then in small print, it says, well, the side effects of this medication are, and you could
Yeah.
write a book.
Yeah.
So, how did that medication with so many side effects even get approved?
Well, it's interesting, right? We'll use that example of medication, right? So you see an advertising for this happy couple or this happy person, and they're living the life, dream life. They got this medication. Look at me, whoopee, right? But then as the commercial goes on, don't take this medication if you're going to be out of sunlight for 10 hours. Don't take this if you have this
Right.
skin or this problem. Like if you take this medication, don't take this. So a lot of it goes into factors of this will help you, but then you have 16 other things that will break you
Right.
with the same medication. Yeah. Just want to throw it out there, you know?
And that's what I'm referring to as the side
Yeah.
effects. And
Yeah.
I heard one the other day. I don't remember what it was from, but they said these are the side effects, and there must have been 10 of them.
Yeah.
And the last thing they said was, and this is not a complete list.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, wait a minute. When they do test trials, and again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not into research, just to say, but if they're really putting this thing through all these medical trials and there's that many side effects,
Right.
how does it get approved?
Yeah.
How?
Right.
Well, we
Yeah.
know how. It's called money. Um,
Yeah.
but it just boggles my mind.
Yeah. And going back to the food example, right? You know, at what point though do we
Mm,
are we the fools or is the business the fool? Because they're putting this fresh lettuce that looks like water falling off of it,
mm,
and this fresh tomato that flies and it hits the burger and the
mm,
bun.
hmm.
And this burger looks like it's this thick. And oh
Right.
my God, I'm just going to bite this thing. But then when you go into the place to buy
Mm,
it,
mm,
it looks like somebody sat on it and the ketchup's falling all over it. And there are hardly any onions on it. There's only one pickle. And the burger looks like, well, they took four burgers and cut them up into 16 burgers and we're going to sell it for $10 each. You know, it's
right.
barely any meat, maybe one pickle, a couple of onions. And a bun, well, if you're lucky, if it's fresh, it's kind of stale or whatever, they smash it together, wrap it up, and slide it out. Here you go. And we buy it.
Again, it comes down to buyer beware.
Yeah.
But I also have said for a long time, if the public, as a general statement, if the public really cared, stop buying the product.
Yeah.
It won't take long before the corporate that's making that product loses so much revenue that they have no choice but to change.
And I can't wait to talk more about this book that I'm reading when I'm finished with it to talk about that. And it
Okay,
talks a little bit about that. You know, these companies aren't going anywhere because there are billions and billions of dollars
correct.
spent in this,
Mhm.
and people will just buy it. Well, because it's what we do, right? We had a conversation earlier about a burger chain that now created a combo, and
Mm,
this burger chain never did this before. This is like the very first time they ever created a combo with the burgers or fries and a drink or a milkshake. And they were talking about, yeah, I hate to see the burger if the combo is $13. And I said, what's the burger? The size of a quarter? What do you
gee,
get, like four fries in a pack and a regular soft drink? I mean, I'm blown away at the tricks that these companies are using now to still sell high, but give you less
mhm.
product, you know?
Right, right. Well, I
Yeah.
remember years and years ago, I lived in outside of Chicago, and and again, this is all across the board, but I happen to have gotten to know an owner of one of the burger franchises of that particular location.
Mhm.
And at that particular time, the corporation said, we're going to advertise for dollar burgers. instead of like the 2.99, 3.99, whatever it was at that time.
Mhm.
And all the restaurants were like, we're going to lose money if it's a dollar because it's not just the burger, it's all the overhead for the whole, the whole business.
Sure.
And what the company came back and said to the franchise was, now it's up to you to sell the fries and the drinks. Because what we're now paying $3 for a plastic cup of whatever beverage, it costs them maybe 25 cents
Yeah.
for the syrup, the water, the ice, the cup, the lid, the straw, 25 cents. They're selling for $3. So they're
Yeah.
willing to let you come in. It's almost like I talked about a couple of weeks ago with way back when there was the record store
Yeah.
and they were losing money on the record, but they got you
Mhm.
in the store. Well, it's the
Right.
same
The
thing
keys to get you in. Right. Yeah.
to get you in. So if
Yeah.
you're in and you like the fact that it's a dollar burger, well, how many burgers can you eat? You got to wash it down. So here's get the drink. And by the way, let's upsize the drink for you because the burgers are so cheap. Upsize the drink. Now you're
Yeah.
paying $6 for a drink that cost them 50 cents. So they're
Yeah.
making it all back that way. But
Right. And
again,
who
it's
wants a burger without fries, right? So you got to add the fries
got to
to
have
it.
fries. And then they
Yeah,
sold the
exactly.
fries because when you have the salt, you want to drink more. So you get a larger drink. So
Yeah.
it's all that mind games that they're playing. Um, Again, it's burgers, it's cars, it's you name it, whatever they're doing.
Jewelry.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's part of doing business. I get that businesses are in business for a profit. I get that.
Yeah.
But there's overhead you have to cover. But if you work smart and control your costs to the best that you can,
Yeah.
you don't have to charge X crazy dollars or make a burger, this big and charge $7 for it. You can get
Yeah.
around it.
Yeah. I think we talked about this before about packaging. How, let's just take a box of cereal, for example, right? You grab a box of cereal, you can barely hold it because the cardboard's so thin.
Right.
But they shaved that down in the processing. They probably saved themselves $100,000 a month by
Hmm.
giving you a flimsy box you can barely hold. And then
Right.
they put the cereal in the plastic inside of it, and
Right.
they give you probably quarter less of what they gave you before, but they
Hmm.
charge you 99 cents or a dollar more for it.
Right.
And that's how they're making profit. It blows my mind,
Yeah.
where we're at in this country right now with this inflation and the way things are going. And
Hmm.
obviously with this advertising, what we're seeing is things aren't really what they seem.
They're
It's a
not.
great topic, talking about reality and how things really aren't what they seem anymore,
They're not. They're not.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned inflation. What I've been tossing around in my own brain for years. The government says, and I know I'm going off track, but I'll come back. Um, the government says our preferred indicator of inflation is sitting at X percent. They never explained what the preferred method was because it's not the consumer price index, which everybody else uses. They're
Which you would
making their
think, right?
own because they can make it up and they can change the
Yeah.
components. So,
Yeah.
how accurate is that? And it's not, is the answer.
Yeah.
So, that also causes issues.
Right.
Um, but anyway, to that's another whole discussion. But to bring it back,
Right.
I don't know what the answer is other than to say if people in a large enough number will boycott a gas station, an auto dealership, um, a burger joint, something, if enough people boycott it for it could just be a couple of days, the amount of revenue lost has to do something to the company.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I've noticed when I see signage, advertising, some commercials on TV. I don't have much TV, but I do see between like Amazon. I noticed that there are a lot of places that were charging all this money for the food have now went back into these specials, like a $6 sub,
Right.
9.99, two meals for 10.99, come in. Why go to this burger place? You can come to ours for 10.99 and
Hmm.
two people for 19.99, So I've seen a little bit of a change here going on with better pricing.
Hmm.
And I think they're starting to get it that you're inflating everything so much that the consumer has finally said, like you said, we've had enough. I'm not buying your stuff anymore because I can't afford it, you
Well,
know?
that's the key. And
Yeah,
I said this many times on our episodes. When large companies start to downsize just to show a profit, because now you have less expenses. So the same revenue with less expenses gives you more of a profit. And you start laying people off. You don't give raises. You cut back on benefits. At some point, all those people that are not being paid as much as they used to, or people that are now laid off, they can't afford to buy your goods and services. And as the unemployment rate continues to grow, again, I'm here in New York, you see all these big corporations laying off 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 at a time.
yeah,
People can't afford it. At some point, it's
yep,
going to catch up to you because now nobody's there to buy your stuff.
yeah,
And that's one of the reasons that, like, food places and other things are starting to, they have no choice but to reduce their margin just to
mm,
get people in the door.
yeah,
Some
yeah,
revenue is better than no revenue, as long as you're making a profit.
yeah,
But excuse me, the question is how much
yeah,
profit do you need to make?
yeah. There is a big giant famous chain that when you walk in, and I'll give you my process. I'll tell you how I do it.
Mm,
I'll show you where I'm going with this. I use their app. I'll enter deals, right? You get the points,
hmm.
you get stuff, and then you get stuff for free, right?
Hmm.
When I walk in, I press the button that I'm got my order placed here. I place it, I paid for it. Boom, I get a number, right? And did you know as soon as I place that order, that number goes up to the screen, number 1602. Boom, it goes right to off the screen. And it pops up on my app that says your order is now ready within 3 seconds. But yeah, I'm still waiting there for 5 minutes for my order.
Mm.
And I've said a couple of times, hey, the app said my order's ready. And they look at you like, like, "Ooh, what are you, dumb?" I know what they're doing. They're fudging the numbers to make themselves look good because
Right.
corporate says so, you know?
Correct. Correct.
You and I have talked about this a long time, man. Entrepreneurship, small business is where it's at, you
It
know?
is.
And we know that with inflation right now, the cost of goods is keeping businesses from, growing and
Yeah.
and hurting small businesses. But I think that's what the answer is to get back to that small
Mm.
business to where I can go to Steve's restaurant, buy his burger. Yeah, it might be $9, $10, but at least I know I'm supporting Steve's business. I'm not supporting this corporate chain that could care less that I walk in with that mashed burger that doesn't look like what they said on the menu. And then I got to wait for it, 5, 10 minutes, even though they said, oh, your order's ready. Well, it's not ready, you know?
Many large companies, if I don't want to say all, many large companies spend tremendous amounts of money on marketing and advertising. Part of that comes from all the different stores and locations in the corporation. So your food restaurants, all your burger joints, all your sub shops, all whatever, they're all kicking in a percentage. When I had my business 12, 13 years ago, they charged me a fee every month for marketing. I got nothing, zero for it.
Yeah,
But to supplement their budget, their desire to market, but they marketed the same commercial across the country because it's cheaper. But what may have worked in California or Florida or Texas didn't work in New York.
yeah.
Different
And I
mindset.
and I cannot wait to talk to you when I finish this book. This book was written 5 years ago,
Mm,
and it blew my mind because when I first started reading it, I'm like, where's this book been? And how was this 5 years ago
mm,
with this knowledge that I could have used 3 years ago when I started my
mm.
business?
Yeah.
It's going to blow your mind. I'm blown away at what I read that's been 5 years ago.
Mm.
That's not outdated. I'm telling you, this stuff is
Okay.
real, and I see it, and I
Mm,
kind of thought about it as I was going through all of my, 20,000 epiphanies and transitions with my business,
mm,
how I ended up where I am right now today, and I'm about to pivot again.
mm.
But it blew my mind when I read this. I'm like, where have these two guys been in the past 5 years? It
Yeah.
blew my mind. And this book, even though it's only 5 years old, though, it's still
Mm.
relevant in 2025, and it will be relevant in 26.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Mm.
I can't wait to share it with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're gonna have to do an episode on the book.
Yeah,
Seriously.
probably, but then that will be giving away a lot of secrets.
I don't
Hey,
have to
that's
give
what we're
everything
about, right?
away, but that's
Yeah,
what we're
and we're
here to
about
help the
helping people.
public. So
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's good stuff. I mean, that's on the business side. But then if you want to flip to the personal side, um, how many dating sites where you put up a picture and the picture looks really good? Then you end up meeting the person and you're trying to figure out who's the person in front of me
Yeah.
because it's so different than the
Mhm.
picture. Bunch of years ago, oh, at this point, it's probably at least 5, 6, 7 years ago. I was working for a company and they gave me a list of clients and I was out selling services, which is fine. And I walked into one real estate agent. Again, I'm not going to tell you who it was. I walked in and there's a stack of cards on the counter and there's nobody at the front desk. There's a stack of cards. And I pick up one of the cards and it says, broker's name is whatever the person's name was. And a few minutes later, somebody comes out of the back and I said, I'm here to see whatever the person's name was as the broker.
Right, right.
And she looks at me and she goes, that's me. Looking at her, looking at the card, looking at her, I'm looking at the card, I'm going, no,
You
seriously,
sure?
where's
You
the
sure?
broker? She goes, that's me. I said,
Yeah.
how old is this picture on the card? It was probably like a 40-year-old picture.
Wow.
When she was in her 20s, she's now in her 60s, does not look anything like it. I'm not saying she wasn't, attractive where she is, but I'm
Mhm.
just going for the fact that the difference of what she looked like back then and what she looked like now is very deceptive
Yeah,
when you're picking up a card. And that's
yeah,
not right because yes, there are a lot of people who say, I don't care what you look like. If you can provide the service at what I'm looking for at the right price, we're doing business.
sure.
But there's still a lot of people who view the physical you instead of the mental, emotional you. And if that physical you is so different, you're going to turn them right off and you don't know who they're talking to.
And I'm going to give you one word that my company is big on,
Hmm.
that this book is big on. This is a clue to this book, right? A big thing right now today we're having, and you just hit on it, is trust. You can't
Hmm.
trust that person if that person
Correct.
doesn't look like that, they
Correct.
don't act like that, they're not the same. People have a problem trusting today. That's a huge, huge problem today. Trust.
Trust
If
is
they don't
big.
trust your brand, they're not buying. They're not buying you. You know?
Correct. Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah. Trust is huge. And
yeah,
part of that trust, even before you open and I don't mean you, I'm talking general.
sure.
Even before you open your mouth, people look at you, the person versus the card.
Yep,
Trust. If you're not being honest enough with that, how do I know that when you open your mouth and try to tell me what you do, that you're being honest?
yeah. So true.
Don't know.
Yep,
And people this day and age, they're getting smarter.
yeah.
They're getting smarter. And I
Yep.
heard, not I heard, I read recently, and again, this is only one survey. I don't know how many are out there, but it said 90% of today's, I guess, younger generation, if you will. Again, I'm old, so everybody's younger than me, right? But 90%
You
of,
boomer, you.
thank you. I won't tell you what I've been called, but 90% of people out there will look for you on social media. And based on what they see and research, if they're willing to buy their 90% there, 95% there, they just pick up the phone to make sure that you're real.
Yeah.
But even in that 5%, they're asking you a couple of questions. And if what you say to them doesn't match what they just read, click and they're gone.
Yeah. And did you know if someone walks into your bricks and mortar store to buy
Mhm.
your product, they're already on Amazon, Walmart,
Mm.
they're Googling other places, looking at
Yeah.
reviews while they're in your location
Hmm.
before they even buy anything.
Correct.
And all this is happening within seconds,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
So it's consumers are winning. They're looking at all this different, and that's why my business exists. I
Right.
want to help these people, all this online noise. I want to help your business. That way, when people do come to you, they don't have that painted vision of what your business was like. They have the real from Q.A.C team that said, look, we were here. This is what happened. This is what they're like. And you're listening to the podcast of the owner, like you and I are talking on a Friday Four podcast. They know who we are. They know we're genuine. They can trust us. They know they can pick up the phone and call us right now and be like, hey, Chuck and Steve are definitely guys to trust, you know?
That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Because anybody can put up a review on Google or
Yeah.
wherever they're putting it up. But it's also been shown, and at least my experiences with the restaurant industry, I cannot speak to the world, but how many times have I gone on to look at a restaurant and there's a bunch of negative reviews, only to find out that all those reviews are their competitors
Yeah.
because they don't want you to walk into the competitor's store.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's where a company like Q.A.C team can go in. They do their own site visit. So it's not pictures, because again, pictures can be deceiving. It's
Absolutely.
walking in, looking
Yeah.
around. And there's only certain things you can and can't do, but looking around, cleanliness, signage, lighting, service, all those things, then you can say, okay, it's good because, or it's could use some improvement because.
Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah.
very
Absolutely.
valuable service because, again, it's independent.
Yeah. Now, how's that tied to what you do? Because I want to make sure that, we give you a plug here at the end. Give some insight on, how that works on the financial side. Because I know, especially with life insurance, if there's no trust there, you're never going to get into that person.
Correct.
That's huge for you.
Oh, yeah. So there's a whole bunch of things that go into it. Number one is you have to lead with education. What's out there? What are your options? Then you get into what the person currently has to see what they might potentially need to plug the holes from where they are to where they want to get to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you have to remember when you have an option to say, I want this particular product or service, you could go directly to the company. You don't have to come through me. But if you go to the company, which company do you go to? What questions do you ask? How do you know the answers you're getting back are even right? Who's going to be there when you have a problem? That's why. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to say, when you go to company X and you want to buy the product, you're paying the same price as if you went to me. The same price, because I get paid by the company, not by you. So whether you buy from me or the company, that commission I'm getting is still in the price. So would you rather pay somebody and sit across the table and look in their eyes and say, yes, I trust the person? Or would you rather buy something on the phone where you've never seen the person? You don't even know if they're legitimate.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
think
probably.
I think I mentioned this to you before. Back when I had my mystery shopping company in 2008 to
Mm,
2012, I actually had a client that I never talked to
mm,
anybody in the business at all.
wow.
I sent them an email. They replied, yeah, send me your proposal. I sent the proposal. They replied back, yes, we love it. They signed up. They were sending me a check every week
Mm,
faithfully. And they had 11, 12 locations. And
wow.
I was doing dine-in, delivery,
Mm,
and carry out,
right.
all three services from each location. It was
Mm,
amazing. And that made me feel good because why? They trusted me.
right.
They trusted me that they're going to send this guy thousands of dollars a week to do a service. They've never
Yeah.
talked to the guy. They never talked to me. Made me feel good. I knew I was heading in the right direction with that.
But if you're adding real value, companies appreciate that
Yeah,
because when you're, again, regardless of company, when you're inside the company, you're thinking one way. You're thinking the way the company wants you to think,
yeah,
which could be drastically different from the public who comes into your company to buy your product or service. And if you don't have those two views matched, you could have the best widget in the world. Nobody wants it. You're
nobody
broke. You're
wants
out
it.
of business.
Yeah,
So
so
it's
true.
critical. So the service you did provide back then and what you're doing now are so valuable as the real time, independent view. And
Yeah,
that's huge.
yeah,
In your case, you're talking about people's health. If
yeah,
you walk into X restaurant and it's not clean, you see little things walking around, whatever the case may be,
yeah.
and the public doesn't see it, they're at risk. They're at big time risk.
It's the truth. Yeah,
So by pointing this stuff out up front as areas of improvement, now at least it's public. The restaurant has a choice:
yeah,
fix it or have an issue. And the
yep,
public can see it and say, I'm willing to take my chance or not.
yep.
So it's both sides that you're servicing from the middle of the road independent perspective. And that's why I think it's so great what you do.
Yeah, and you as well. You know, you're helping people get through one of the most difficult times of their life when someone passes away, and you're helping them from the earlier stages up until they're ready to retire and pass on and leave things behind for their family. Good stuff.
I'm
Yeah.
working with a guy and he's in Florida and he tells a story that he's sort of my age. And when he was much younger and he got into the business, he found a family who needed some help. They took out a policy on the husband, $300 a month.
Whew.
No, okay. So 3 months later, husband has a massive stroke and dies.
Ugh.
3 months. They paid him $400,000 death benefit.
Wow.
So you're going to sit there and say $300 based on where you are financially may or may not be a lot of money. And if obviously that's not a set number, it goes up and down. But
Sure.
what's the risk?
Yeah.
What's the downside of not protecting your family, the mortgage, the
Yeah.
credit cards, the funeral expenses? If somebody doesn't have it, then you're talking about GoFundMe.
Yep.
And it's
Whole
been
other
shown,
topic.
oh, it is. And it's been
Yeah.
shown that of people that put up a GoFundMe, number one, you're only getting, I think the article was two-thirds of what you need only for the funeral. Then the question is, how does the family live without the income? Then
Yeah.
the question becomes, you just told the world that you don't have enough money to bury your loved one.
Your significant other. Yep.
Well, every which way you can think about it.
Yeah. Yep. And
Doesn't
if
take
people want to know more, yep. And if people want to know more, 516-727-2294. Reach out to Steve.
thanks.
Pick his
Thanks.
brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, as we keep saying
Yep.
all the time, I would love to have a conversation with you. There is
Yeah.
no cost, there is no obligation. But if I
Yep.
can help you understand your options,
Yep.
what you do is up to you. But if I can at least help you understand your options. And
Get the
Chuck, on your
brain thinking. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and then
Yeah.
Chuck, on your side,
Yeah.
when you go into restaurants, 410, my eyes are bad, sorry, 410-935-6132. Give him a call. If you have a restaurant, you're in Maryland.
Or any business, not just restaurants.
Yeah,
Yeah. Any
any
business.
business.
Yeah.
Give them a
Yeah.
call. It's worth
Let's
an
analyze it.
independent view because
Yeah.
again, when you're inside the business, you're thinking your way.
Yep.
But there's so much more out there that the consumer's looking for that you may
Right.
not be aware of,
Yeah.
may not want to acknowledge for
Yep.
whatever the reasons are. But if you don't make a change, you could be out.
Yeah. Very good point, man. So another great episode. I love the topic. I love, we were starting to go off a little bit on topic, but it all
Right?
came back together
Right.
with what we were talking about was, this altered reality that we're seeing, great stuff.
Yeah,
Man.
yeah. And
Steve, again, thanks for coming on.
no,
Appreciate it.
absolutely.
Another good episode. Another good
You as
episode.
well.
I love doing this. This is one of my favorites, and
Yeah, I love
we
this.
get to, yeah, we get to tell people, our thoughts and what we think about a specific topic and specifically how we can help them and help boost their business, and show them things that we know can help them, you
Right.
know?
Right. And
Yeah.
again, as we say every week, this is just two guys, our opinions. We're not sponsored, so we're not loyal to anybody. This is our
Yeah.
view of the world, but our
Yeah.
goal is to help you. That's our
Yeah.
goal.
Yep. And I forgot to mention, we were actually live on Instagram. I think Anthony was here watching with us.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Anthony, if you're still there, how you doing, buddy? We had a viewer. Great to start, right?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Steve, thanks for coming on again, man. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
my pleasure. Thank you.
Another Friday Four great episode
Mhm.
because
It's 4 o'clock somewhere.
4 o'clock somewhere. I love it. Hey, have a great rest of the
You too.
day. Great evening. Have a great weekend. And
Yeah, listen, I don't know when this is going to air, but this is Memorial Day weekend. So if you're viewing this real time, have a great holiday weekend and we'll see you next week.
you got it. Take care,
Yeah.
Steve.
Thanks, Chuck.
See
Take
you,
care.
buddy.
Bye.
You too, buddy. See ya.
You've been watching the Friday at 4 podcast series with your host Charles Luttrell and co-host Steve Kent. Thanks for watching.